Evans. Thank you for joining us on the Rice Pudding Project.
Thanks a lot, John. Yeah. Nice to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you here. So I know a little bit about you, but that's why we're here to get to know more about you. If you want to tell us what it is you do at the moment to the audience at home, and then we can dive into some questions.
Yeah, so I'm in Dubai. I've been here for 4 years, and I'm an entrepreneur. So I'm in the water business, basically. And what we are doing is basically two main things. One is developing an adaptive AI-driven adaptive data management platform, basically. So it's a data platform to optimize existing water infrastructure.
Okay.
And there's a lot of inefficiencies in existing, especially water treatment plants around the world. So it's a global problem. And the UAE is a very good hub to start it out and expand it.
Okay.
And the second thing is we design, build, own and operate small and medium-sized water treatment infrastructure. So not big, massive desalination plants, but more like, let's say Unilever or a Nestle or someone is using water in their processes. They produce wastewater. Instead of just dumping their wastewater into the sewer and becoming a problem for someone else to treat, you can treat on site. You can recycle the wastewater.
Okay, so you just get that and you recycle it and it can be usable again.
Can be used
drinking
again.
Water?
In that case, it wouldn't be drinking water. It'd be industrial reuse. So it's reused for whichever kind of process they need it for.
Okay.
It might have to be drinking standard depending on what they're doing. You know, if, for example, if they're making Coca-Cola or something, it would have to be drinking standard. But if it's a mining company that just clean enough to clean the coal, you know, then it doesn't have to be drinking standard. So varies quite a lot. Yeah.
It's weird, but why do you need to have? I know that going to sound weird now, but why do you need to do that to the water to clean coal?
That's a good question. I don't actually know a lot about the specifics of the coal, but you know, there's all different kinds of mining, industrial processes. They all use, not all, but virtually all of them use water for some aspect of their process.
Okay.
And in coal, I understand some process, and I'm going to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about in coal now, but basically in a coal, I think at some point they could actually clean the debris off the coal and, and
all right. Fair
put
enough.
it in blocks to be able to
sell it and things
use
it. Yeah. Now, but you're but you were a Marine.
Yeah, I was a Marine. So I grew up in South Africa, but I come from a military family. My father's American.
Okay.
And I grew up hearing the stories, World War II stories, and so on. Yeah. And I got the bug in me a little bit.
I used to watch the TV shows all the time. Like it was a TV show, Tour of Duty, that I used to watch about Vietnam, and you know, they had like a famous Pink Floyd song, I think it was, Painted Black. Yeah. And I was always smitten by that Full Metal Jacket. Is that what kind of?
I think the final straw was Top Gun. You know, I thought it was going to be Tom Cruise flying jets. You know,
but you became a Marine.
Yeah.
Is it because you're too tall for the jets?
I'd like to use that excuse, but it was actually I was took some flights in the back of the jet, and it wasn't doing so well in my stomach, to put it diplomatically. You know. So.
But how does that get you into the water business?
Yeah, that's a good question. So very simply put, the wars in my generation, post 9/11, were fought over energy.
Okay.
Oil.
Yeah.
And I believe, for various reasons, it sort of took me some time to understand it better. But the wars of the future, you might say, of the present, are going to be fought over water, unless we change how we engage with water. You know, so instead of hoarding water like we've hoarded oil, trying to control it, for my use, often at your expense, or even if I don't need it, I want to control it so you can't get access to it because now I've got more power than you. That's what is going on in my generation. And so if you do that with water, unlike oil, is not a finite stock. Doesn't get used up and then it's gone. It's an infinite, infinitely renewable resource. And so a lot of people just don't really understand that. You know, in their mind, the paradigm is to hoard and control, and that is not going to work. The old win-lose paradigm, I'm going to win, you're going to lose. If you do that with water, will equal lose-lose. So it can be win-win or lose-lose. And so I wanted to be part of reshaping the way we deal with it and hopefully prevent the wars of the future.
Okay, that's a very forward way of thinking about things.
Yeah.
Okay. On the flip side, if you did hoard that technology, you'd become a very, very rich man.
Yeah, in theory, but I think the world we live in today is so interconnected. I think it's more likely it'll backfire at some point. Make yourself a target. I think we have to get into a way of thinking of collaboration. I think it's going on anyway. I think there's a transition happening in the world.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more about those who can collaborate better will be the quote-unquote winners. I think this is part of what's happening in the world. Is a transition going on.
Okay. Yeah. Can you do this with ocean water as well? Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah.
So it can be used. So you can take water from the ocean, what would you say, purify it or
desalination.
Desalination, and then it can be used for drinking and everything.
Yeah, they have technologies to do that. It's widespread. In fact, UAE is number 2 in the world. Saudi Arabia is number 1 in desalination. Right. So the stuff that we do, we can do that as well. And it's not rocket science doing that. There's certain innovation going on in terms of how much every 100 liters of seawater that comes into your process, how much of it becomes drinking water. It's called a recovery rate. So right now it's like 60 or so liters become drinking water, and the rest is highly saline brine. That's waste. So this is the challenge that's got to be solved. Yeah.
But 60% out of 100 liters, you can get 60 liters.
Typically, depending on the technology, they have technologies to get all the way up to 100%. It's very expensive to treat the final 10 liters of the waste of the seawater.
Right.
There's a lot of variables involved in water. It's never a clear and cut thing. It depends on the chemistry of the wastewater or the seawater. Certain seawater, like here, is very salty. So it just depends.
On that. Yeah. Okay. You were in the Marines. How old were you when you started in the Marines?
So I did 4 years at a military college. So I was 19 when I went in there. So it's 23 till 29.
Is the training as tough as I think it is? Because you see those movies like Officer and Gentleman and all that kind of stuff. If your bed's not pristine, if your buckles are not shined, if your boots are scuffed, you're going to be in the in the rain, like running with the gun. Is it like that, or
it goes through phases of different phases of training. It's not like that all the time. I mean, there's a lot of Hollywood going on with those, obviously, but there are times where it's pretty intense, and certain programs, depending on what you do, are more into shining shoes and uniforms and whatever, and certain are more physical, obviously. So there's quite a spectrum, quite a spectrum.
All right. So you went you were there in Naval Academy. In the academy for 4 years.
Yeah.
Before that, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a little town in the Free State in South Africa. It's basically between Johannesburg and Durban.
Okay.
So I grew up there. When I was very young, we lived in a couple of other towns in South Africa, but most of my upbringing was there.
Okay.
And then I did 1 year of high school in the States before going into the military.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. How was that growing up in South Africa?
Well, it was good. It was a small. It was a beautiful area. It's sort of on the edge of the escarpment, the Drakensberg Mountains. If you're familiar in South Africa.
No, I've been to Cape Town only.
Yeah.
Basically,
it's the main mountain range. It runs parallel to the coast, goes through Lesotho.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah.
And my town was close to Lesotho, so I was hunting and fishing with my father all the time. So it's outdoors all the time. So.
Okay.
So looking back, we were very fortunate to have that kind of upbringing.
You camped a lot?
Didn't do that much camping, to be honest. A little bit, but we were out afternoon, mornings, weekends, constantly.
Okay, that's a nice childhood to have, like outdoors. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Do you have any brothers and sisters, or
2 sisters? Yeah.
Did they go out with you as well?
Hunting yeah. We all grew up together. Yeah.
Okay. And then when you would hunt, like you hunt. You go fishing, you go fishing, you cook what you catch.
Yeah, my father was quite big on that. You don't ever shoot anything you don't eat. So
okay.
Yeah, we always brought the whatever we hunted back home and typically froze it and then ate it.
Okay.
So yeah.
What was the tastiest thing you ever caught?
Probably the tastiest thing I ever had was springbuck. I hate to admit it for the rugby players, but my grandmother made some springbuck. She put some the garlic. She plugged in it and cooked it for a whole day long, and it fell apart in your hands. It was so tender. That's probably the best.
And then, what brought you to Dubai?
I actually, when I was in the military, my final assignment, my late 20s, was in Abu Dhabi. At the embassy. And my job basically was to oversee the Marines providing security at the embassies and consulates around the region here. So I'd travel around, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, basically all the countries in the region, checking up on the Marines. And so I got a sort of an understanding of this region, and I've always been very interested in it for some reason. I was very interested in the source of these conflicts that we were having. Obviously since you're sort of involved. And but it made quite an impression on me back then. I got out of the military, and then several years later, when I got into the water business, it became clear to me for various reasons that the UAE is the right place to base the business, because there's a lot of innovation happening. Yeah, you've seen what's going on, and in the water space, I sort of saw a bit of a gap. There is innovation happening, but not that much, and we can play a role in in it basically. So that's why, you know.
It's amazing you say that AI is what's helping you in this, because a lot of people, when you hear about AI now, you're just thinking about, what pictures can I do of myself, and what scams and things like that. It's nice or refreshing to hear that AI is being used in a positive way. So that's really that's pretty impressive. So you grew up in South Africa, and you went into the military. You said your father had a military background.
Actually, he didn't. He was a professor of English, you know. So
really, Oh wow, okay.
So no, he wasn't. But his father and his grandfather and his uncle. I mean,
did he teach in South Africa?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he actually spent a lot of time in the UK, you know. Okay. So he was born in the States, but it was just post World War II.
Yeah.
So he was in Europe a lot, Paris, Germany as a kid, you know, and then, he's one of these guys. He's quite autistic and very creative kind of a guy, and he went to the university in the UK. His mentors there actually said to him, you know, because he liked the outdoors so much, said, you should go to Africa, you should go to South Africa and experience what it's like, you know. So he got himself a little bit confused with Ernest Hemingway and did a big game trip to Africa that went on for 35 years basically, you know. So.
And what did he think about you going into the Marines?
Well, he was very in favor of it, you know. He's very big on tradition, and you know, he saw it as a family tradition which he didn't sort of follow through on. So in a sense, I was connecting the chain back up again. So he was quite in favor of it, you know.
And how hard was it? Did you see any? Can we talk about?
Yeah, sure. No worries. Yeah.
Did you see any action? Is that the right way the terminology to say it? Did you see any combat or conflict while you were in the?
No. So I was in a combat arms, you know. So virtually all my peers were in it. I didn't. It was largely because I was stationed in Hawaii. They kept the Marines in Hawaii back, you know, when this Iraq stuff started going on. So the reason for that, they didn't want to commit all the forces, you know, at one time. So, and then when I rotated to Abu Dhabi, I used to go to Baghdad from Abu Dhabi just to the embassies, you know, but I wasn't in combat capacity. I was just checking on the Marines, and so there were some things like incoming mortar fire in the embassy at one point, and we'd go down into the basement and so on.
It's got to be scary though, still, because anything can happen at any time, right?
Well, you always stay alert, but you know, it wasn't anything close to what others were going through. So yeah, it was always good to keep your head in a swivel. Yeah.
That always worried me. I mean, because I've met some people who did face combat, and then some of them they're not exactly, they don't. How do I say, not that they're the same, but they're always a little bit scarred and a little bit
it certainly
hesitant to talk about it. That's why I question.
Yeah. No, I understand. No, it certainly has different. It's a very interesting topic, actually. I'm very interested in the psychology of it, and it's an interesting one, you know, and how some people take two people, they go through the same experience in combat. One of them's deeply affected, and the other one's able to process it fairly easily and move on. So it's very interesting, you know.
Because it's how do you get over that, like that kind of trauma? Like, you know, who do you talk to about it? How do you talk about it? Because you've seen something that other people haven't seen, and maybe you don't want to talk about it again. And it's like, you know, mentally, it's going to have an effect on you. And then, like, how do you heal from that?
I'm very interested in this subject. I think it's been poorly understood. You know, it's still not very well understood.
Yeah.
A lot of talk about it. You know, the PTSD is the thing that everyone talks about. In my personal view, I think PTSD is only one small component of this issue, you know. And so it's an interesting subject. And I think there's also what they call moral wounds, you know, when a soldier figures out that the mission they were on wasn't exactly morally justified, or quite the opposite in some cases. So,
but you can't question it at the time.
Exactly,
you're not supposed to question it also at the time. You're supposed to do as you're told.
Correct.
Because you're following the leader, as you say. But so, what do you think is the best way for people who have seen combat to deal with their issues and to heal and to get through it?
Let me just pick three things, I guess, that come to mind. The one is to stick with your fellow comrades, you know, and don't isolate yourself. I mean, I think I've certainly been guilty of that. I mean, I wasn't in combat, but I look back in that period, and I definitely isolated myself quite a lot, which is not a good option. So you want to spend a lot of time with people that went through what you went through. That's one. And another one, I think, is, you know, when I was in the military, I remember still clearly, you know, if you went to see a psychologist about something, or if you talked about it, not only was it frowned upon, so, you know, just in general, but it could result in a ding on your record and you wouldn't get into certain other jobs, you know.
Really?
So, yeah, because it's, you know, so that was very unhealthy, obviously, at the time. And then I think the third thing for me is just my personal thing that I found quite useful is just spending time in nature, you know, being outdoors,
being grounded.
Yeah, just being get away from the rat race, and I think it's helped quite a lot of veterans as well.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that stigma. It's not even just in the military, but in other parts of the world, other facets of life.
Yes,
especially as men. You got this stigma where we have to be strong, tough, and this and that, and you can't be vulnerable. You can't, and if you do, you're a wimp or you're X, Y, Z or whatever.
Yeah,
and then that causes that problem that we can't talk about it. Yeah. And in my personal experiences, when you can't talk about it, you end up building it up and bottling it up and then lashing out. Yeah. And at the wrong times, are the wrong situation. Yeah. So it's hard. I mean, for me, my healing process, a lot of it's come down to the last few 3, 4, even earlier than that, but it's becoming humor. Comedy, you know, laughing about it, talking about it, and things like that. So, do you think that humor or
absolutely
helps, or it's kind of under?
No, I think it's very important, and it's part of spending time with your people who went through it with you. You know, I mean, Marines have a certain dark kind of sense of humor, which it's good, you know, but it's. I think it's very important, you know.
Okay, so I mean, like, let's talk about your childhood a little bit, because you were very outdoorsy, right? Yeah. So I'm guessing you weren't like playing computer games and stuff. A lot, and
well, actually, I could advertise myself that way, but actually, we had one of the first computers in the town, I think. Okay. So we played a lot of those as well. Actually.
What would like the funnest, besides going fishing and hunting, you know, with your family? What were some of the TV shows or games and stuff that you used to play as a kid? You know?
Well, me and a buddy of mine, my best friend growing up, still very close to. We loved Airwolf, So.
Oh man!
So that
Vincent. Michael,
Jan Michael Vincent.
Yeah, it's a John Michael Vincent.
That was a classic. I look at it today and I still think this would still be a good movie.
The theme tune is amazing. The theme, he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
He was like my idol.
Was he?
Yeah. Oh yeah, because he did everything right. He had the Jeep, so I bought a Jeep once. He had that cool jacket. Yeah. He played the cello. He lived on a lake. He had a dog. You know what I mean? Like he was a single bachelor man. Women loved him.
Yeah, all the beautiful women.
All the beautiful women. Yeah, you know, but he still lived alone. And he was chilling.
Yeah, no,
he flew that helicopter. You know,
he drove through the desert to this volcano, and
he had his friend, Dominic, the guy.
Dominic Santini.
Yeah, so, Airwolf was amazing. That theme tune was phenomenal. Yeah. I won't sing it, but it was okay. So we were at the same kind of times then. Okay, all right. Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. I loved Airwolf. Sorry, I just got nostalgic there for a second. Would you recommend anyone going into the Marines or military? Some young,
I must be very honest. I'd like to say yes. I think there's amazing things you can learn. I learned a lot from it. Mm-hmm. That's a good side of it. I definitely would recommend it for those reasons. It's to me, there's no excuse for some of the policy that's been rolled out. Mm. And I wouldn't want my own son to go to, or daughter to go into service with the kind of decisions that have been made in the last 25 years. So to be very frank.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do your kids want to do?
I don't have kids actually. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Okay. Not yet, or you don't have not planning just yet.
Yeah. I don't think any time too soon. So but
fair enough.
Never say never.
I always wanted to do the training though.
Do you?
I always wanted to see. Like how cool it would be, how hard it would be to do it, because I've read so much about it.
Yeah,
I was wondering if there was just like a training camp you could do, just But
I think there are things. There are sort of things that give people a taste of it and so on. It's I know I don't want to put a negative thing in it. Probably my most positive experiences in my professional life were in the Marines. I mean, it was an amazing experience in terms of leadership. Camaraderie and discipline, fixing difficult problems, all those kind of things. So it's in particular the Marine Corps. I'm obviously a bit biased, but the Marine Corps has, in my time anyway, had a very, very strong culture.
Is that the one where they say? I was going to say it's going to be. They have they hoorah. Is that the Marine? Yeah. That's the Marines, right?
Hoorah, yeah.
Hoorah. That's it. Yeah. Okay. They're Okay, so what kind of impact did being a Marine have on your life?
The big one that comes to mind is, I was not always the most outgoing personality as a kid, but they're very good at throwing you in the deep end, and you put in charge of 40, 50 Marines and get ready to go to war, so, and it's just like that. And not just like that, you go through training pipeline, but you're learning every step of the way. So I would say it was a big growth curve for me. I learned a lot about people, basically psychology, leadership. I think those are the big takeaways for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. Like I wouldn't have been able to. I mean, I guess you adapt eventually, but like just the thought of doing it, I wouldn't have survived.
I think it's a thing. I think everyone thinks they couldn't do it. I definitely had big doubts and concerns. But when you get in there, it's amazing what you can do when you start doing it.
Was your grandfather alive when you went into the army?
Unfortunately, not. I never met him. Okay. I often wished I could have, but I never did meet him.
Okay. Wondering how he would have thought, or how proud he would have been you going, or what advice he would have given you, maybe.
I've often wanted that advice, to be honest.
Okay, it's kind of like a yin and yang, let's say, your path, in the sense of not to make it too aggressive and things, but like military, army, fighting and things like that. Yeah. And then you went, which you could say that's like more of a fiery kind of element. Yeah. And then you found water. Yeah. And that's made more sense to you, and you did that from your military experience.
Yeah, it is interesting what you bring up there. It's I call it this, the resources of life: water, energy, and food. And energy is more like fire. Oil, fire. The wars were over oil, it's fire. And then going into water, peace. I think I think the military is very important. I think we need it. I think you were a fighter before. I'm a big believer in physical fitness and being ready to fight if you need to fight. The key thing is just being able to, is application of that force, and the Marines are very good at that. Actually, they train you to be very selective, very accurate about when you apply force.
The right time.
Yeah. And I go back to what I said before there. I mean, in some way I would have liked to have done a full career in the military, but it's an interesting dynamic. You've got to have civilian control of the military. It's a big core principle in our democracies, the US and the UK.
You have to?
Well, yeah. If you want to remain a democracy, you have to.
But not to be. I mean, like I've not been part of it, so I don't know. But it seems a bit weird that why would you have a civilian who doesn't know about the military judging or giving feedback on the military? Because they're not trained for it, right?
What you want ideally is you want president and politicians who listen. They don't have to have a military experience. Some of them might have military experience and make very bad decisions still. They need to listen, and they need to have principles. They need to have basic morality, and listen to the advice of these senior military leaders. And then the senior military leaders have to do their job as well, and provide good advice, and have the backbone to push back when the politician wants to do unsound stuff. So we've had problems in all those areas. So it isn't just civilians are bad and the military knows what they're doing kind of thing. I had that sort of view at one point, but it's a bit more involved than that.
Because I'm just like in my field. Yeah. I'm doing something, as a director, and then someone's telling me, "Oh, you should do this." And I'm like, "But you have no idea what you're talking about. You've never done this before. I've been doing this for 20 years. So why are you telling me to do something you don't know what goes into it?" So I'd be the same way. And mine is just I'm doing a commercial about coffee or soap. Yeah. People's you're doing something that people's lives are at stake. Safety is at stake. It's much more. You wouldn't question a doctor, so why would you question? Someone else. So it'd be a bit weird. Was there something that made you say, okay, I'm done now and want to leave, or was it just after a period of time?
I was an amphibious assault vehicle guy, like I said. So actually, for us, I was a lieutenant and a junior captain when I got out. If I'd stayed in and gone to another assignment, I would have probably commanded a company of AAVs. And then just the way AAVs work, I wouldn't have been in the field leading troops very much. I've been in the rear looking at maintenance reports and kind of doing administration and logistics mostly. And I didn't want to. That wasn't why I joined, to do that. So.
And how many people would have been in the company that you would be managing, or obviously?
Yeah, well, it would be some order of magnitude like 150, maybe something like that.
Okay. Yeah. All right, but you wouldn't be on the ground with them. You'd be in the back, like you said.
You can spend time on the ground with them. I mean, and obviously it's up to the personality of the leader. Some leaders do, or commanders get in the field as much as they can, but you sort of have to be in the rear quite a lot to make sure things are done properly. So.
If you look back at like history and the famous leaders or generals, who would be someone that you thought was really cool, or you read about? Was it Patton, Rumsfeld? Like, who would you be? Who would you have like thought I wanted to be like them and lead like them?
My favorite military leader in U.S. history is a guy named General Marshall, I mean, the Marshall Plan in Europe.
Okay.
So he wasn't as well known as like Eisenhower. Everyone remembers Eisenhower.
Yeah.
He was actually Eisenhower's boss, you know. So he was the chief of staff of the army, and he was a really strong leader. And for example, before World War II kicked off, he identified that a lot of there has been a culture of shortcuts and administrative people and not combat leaders running the army. You know? So he sort of cleared a lot of that out.
Okay.
And he picked Patton, he picked Eisenhower, he picked Bradley, he picked some of the top leaders and put them in. You know, he moved them right up the chain quickly.
Okay.
He had an eye for leadership. And then, you know, didn't have a big ego, you know, so he didn't need the glory. He just wanted things to be done properly. He stayed in the rear a lot, pulling strings in a good way.
Yeah.
Made sure the politicians were very well advised, going back to what I said earlier. And then, of course, after the war, you know, he didn't just stop there. He became this Secretary of Defense and a Secretary of State, and he actually was behind the Marshall Plan, and which I believe was one of the wisest decisions made in Western civilization in the last 120 years. You know, he identified that after World War I, the Allies took Germany's face and rubbed it in the mud and humiliated them, and that led to the rise of Hitler.
Yeah.
And after World War II, he very controversially, people were very angry and they didn't want to. But
he wanted revenge again.
He convinced the politicians to invest US dollars into Germany and rebuild Germany. Yeah. Very controversial. You know, how can you do that? That's the enemy. No, no. If we do that, we're going to create a long period of peace and stability and create partnerships.
Okay.
And I think we need that kind of vision in the world today. You know, we've got too much us versus them. Who's going to win? Kind of childishness. You've got to have those. So he's definitely my favorite leader in US history. Yeah.
So that, just touching on that last point you were saying about the mindset about instead of being them versus us and the together mindset. Yeah. So that's how the water came about.
Yeah.
But what introduced you to water? Because it's always been part of your life in terms of like Marines and things like that. But this is a different
kind of water.
Yeah, this is a different way.
Yeah. So actually, I wasn't. You know, I didn't go out looking for it. I didn't have any kind of vision on water.
Okay.
I was in corporate America for a few years after the military, and then I decided to start my own business, and it was actually a very different kind of business. It's kind of a long story, but basically it was building a network of community hubs in the low-income communities outside of the big cities in Africa, starting in South Africa.
Yeah.
And while I was doing that, I was introduced to a company in South Africa that was very innovative in the water space. And they had developed a way of putting the desalination plants, you know, and the water treatment plants inside a shipping container and deploying that to mines, you know. So the mines produce very toxic wastewater, and it's a big problem because the wastewater gets put into these big ponds, and then eventually the ponds overflow into the rivers and it pollutes the whole ecosystem. Everything. So these guys developed a system where they can deploy these containers with a water treatment system in it to clean the wastewater and recycle, like I was saying earlier, the wastewater. Yeah. So I found it quite fascinating, and they were doing it in a very scalable way. Yeah. And so I was introduced to these guys, and just instinctively I had like an intuitive, you know, sometimes in life you meet someone or you
clicks,
or something just resonates, you know.
Yeah.
And so I connected them with a buddy in Jordan who had a company doing something very complementary, and that's how I got into it. So I was going back and forth to Jordan, sort of learning and facilitating the partnership, and that's where it started. You know.
I mean, it's not easy opening a company. And this is not a small thing. It's not like just opening up a shop online and selling some stuff. So there's got a lot of logistical difficulties.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of resistance and a lot of obstacles. Yeah.
So exactly, that's you are, because I've seen the movie. I can't remember which James Bond one it was, like Quantum of Solace or something like that, where the guy is trying to take over the world and control all the water.
Yeah.
So you're literally taking away the power for someone like that. So there's going to be resistance, where they're like, well, why are you making this free and helpful to people when we could control it? So what kind of resistance did you come across?
I haven't specifically come across that kind of resistance. You know, I think the way I try to do it always is align interests. You know.
Yeah.
I think that in many, so you know, my opinion is that there's two big transitions happening now in the world. One is from linear to circular. I mean, in economic terms, a linear economy make waste. You know, take out of the ground, make a product, use a product, waste the product, and just make waste. It's unsustainable.
Yeah.
to the circular economy, which people talk about a lot, make, use, reuse, and it certainly applies with water.
Yeah.
So there's this going on. Renewable energy, that's what that's about as well, is you're not taking the oil and creating waste, you're you're using the sun's energy.
Yeah. Which is what your company does.
Yeah, that's what we do. But then there's another transition that I believe is happening, which maybe not as obvious, and that's from centralized to decentralized. So a lot of, if you look around the world, take South Africa, the energy in South Africa has been provided by one company, the national utility.
Mm-hmm.
And this started out as a very successful, effective company. It's now an extremely dysfunctional company. Corruption, stealing, blackouts, even though there's coal is widely available. So, as a result, what happens, people start putting solar on the roof. The communities start to organize, how can we create our own energy, etc. So, and that's a South African case study. You have a lot of this for different reasons happening all over the world. The more movement back to communities, it's the same principle, So ultimately, in my mind, I envision ultimately we'll have community-driven, community-operated infrastructure, water and energy in a very decentralized way. The community takes ownership in it.
Yeah.
They take ownership in the environment. They take ownership in their own energy, their own water, and ultimately their own food, potentially. And there's a role for government, obviously, to play in this, but it takes certain kind of innovative governments to be able to see ahead and adjust and start supporting these kind of things. I think the UAE is one of those, and they have the vision to. They always seem to be a little bit ahead of the others. It's a long way of answering a question, but I think it's good to avoid conflicts. And the beauty of water is there's almost always a way to create a win-win if you have the ability, if you just talk with people, understand what they want, what they need. The one thing that we can all agree about in the world is water. It's one of the things I like about it. People have different political views and topics and whatever, but on water it's pretty simple. We got to have clean water, so you can work together, have clean water. That's a good baseline.
I mean, the biggest argument is going to be whether you like still or sparkling, right?
In
water. What's the name of your company?
It's called Nexus Resilience Group.
Nexus. Where did that name come from?
I call it that because of the nexus between water, energy, and food. Okay. So we don't look at water just for the sake of water, but what it means in terms of energy, food. For example, in UAE, we import 80 to 90% of the food in this country. Yeah. The reason is because of water. It's not because there's a lack of land. There's plenty of land to grow food, but there's not enough water. So that's the food-water nexus, and then there's the water-energy nexus, the food. So these are all interconnected.
So with your company, what you do is, let's say those lands that haven't got enough water, will you be able to then in the future create ways of getting water to those lands so that they can be cultivated and used for farming and growing as well? This is basically what you can do? Yeah,
so each situation is very different, Typically, so here, in most cases, there is some kind of water under the ground, groundwater. Yeah. So you can access the groundwater and clean the groundwater. It's the same kind of technologies they use for desalination. Yeah. So there's that, so there might be a river that's very dirty that people haven't been able to use. So you can take water from the river, even pipe it a short distance. So there's various different ways of addressing it. But that is the idea. But the ultimate idea is the vision. The big vision idea we talk about is making water, energy, and food locally available, affordable, and accessible.
That's your vision.
That's
your goal.
Yeah, that's the big mantra. I mean, it's a vision that we just play a small role in, but we want to be a pioneer and help to sort of hack our way through the woods to get to the promised land.
Okay, I like what you're saying. It's very, very forward thinking. Is there anything else you want people to know about you or your company and your vision?
We here in the UAE, we're talking with local governments. So if there's an industrial company, probably specifically, that's interested to talk with us, we'd be very interested to speak with them, about either optimizing existing infrastructure or building new plants to recycle the water. I think the other thing I'd say is with water, the whole society has a role to play in it. It's not just big business or government. It's all about collaboration and cooperation. So we will actually have something called the Circular Conversation up on our website quite soon.
Which is?
Basically, it's a platform to raise awareness around water, energy, and food, and the need to transition from linear to circular. Okay. And it will be something that everyone can engage with. So I'll encourage people to take a look at it when it comes up.
And at the moment, you're working with big companies and corporations, and I'd say, is this something that this later on would be used in homes domestically as well, that can be adapted, this technology? or is it at the moment too expensive on the smaller scale?
Yeah, the stuff we're doing is more upstream from household level, you know. So there's a lot of companies that provide solutions at household level. We probably won't do household level stuff. I think we'll focus more on the companies, the governments. I think the one thing that we do want to do is, not right now, we're building towards it, is communities. For example, in East Africa, West Africa,
where they don't have clean water,
don't have good access to water, and then it's not really so much household as community level, where we work with the local government, or if there isn't a good local government there, we can work with the community in an organized way to set up this infrastructure I was talking about and make the water available. Yeah.
Because in these places they have, I mean, the water is, I don't know what is it right to say, that's maybe toxic, this then has a knock-on effect to the community, right? It makes people sick and things like that. So by implementing this, then you help build a healthier lifestyle for these communities.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It connects to everything, you know. It connects to food, as we were saying, health care, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it also connects to security, you know, because for example, you have farmers who don't have good access to water for their cattle. Then they've got to migrate across, you know, a few 10, 30, 100 kilometers away, and now they're coming into conflict with another group of farmers. So you can avoid that by making the water available. And
and then if the animals are not fed clean water, then the effect that has a knock-on effect on the food when they're
correct. It's interlinked. It's a very interlinked thing. You know.
Just going to go back to your military background, only because I've been very Hollywood in terms of watching movies and things like that, and you always have these like profound statements that someone will say, you know, nothing I can remember now, of course. But when you were either in the military or growing up, and you know, in life, what was the best piece of advice you ever got from somebody? When
I was going through Marine, it's called basic officer training. They teach you the basics of reading a map and leading a platoon and that kind of stuff, you know. You spend a lot of time in the field, in the woods. And I was introduced to a guy, also the kind of guy that I previously only thought existed in the movies, to be honest. He was one of these guys who'd done deep operations in other countries and so on. Very interesting character, very disciplined, very good physical shape. You know, I think he'd been a wrestler, actually. I got to know him very well. I used to spend a lot of time with him, and I didn't realize it so much at the time, but he was basically working on me psychologically to prepare me to be a better officer.
Without you even knowing?
Well, I kind of knew, but I mean, he was very sophisticated in the things he was doing with me, and I remember I asked him that question. I said, because 9/11 at the time had just happened, you know, so we were talking about that, and I was expecting to go into Afghanistan, you know, within a few months or so. And his advice to me was, the best advice I can give you is don't ever make a decision or take an action based on emotions. He said, we all have emotions, that's fine, you know, it's very important, but don't ever, in combat especially, do not make a decision based on emotions. That's what gets people killed, you know. So I never forgot that. I always internalized that one, you know. Yeah.
What's the best advice you would give somebody?
I think one of the best things is to keep it simple, you know. I think there's too often people get too stressed out about it, or doing all kinds of complicated things. Simple principles, you know. Simple principles. The kinds of stuff you learn on a farm in the Midwest in the States or South Africa, and you know, basic principles: keep your word, build good partnerships with people, you know. Build trust. I mean, the big one I think is for me is trust. I experience it now in what I'm doing. You've got to, as an entrepreneur, you're vulnerable to. If
you don't have trust.
Yeah, you're vulnerable in general because you're very small. You don't have the resources of a big company, so you've got to pick very carefully who you're dealing with, and you've got to find people you can trust. You know, and obviously you've got to be someone that others can trust as well. So yeah.
Gotcha.
I think those probably be the big ones. So
it was fascinating. We've had a lot of good talked about a lot of good things. A lot of made me feel a bit stupid because I don't know a lot of that stuff. This technology and everything.
I don't know. I'm not a technology guy either, to be honest. I feel stupid all the time.
But what you're doing is literally life changing. It's very, very impressive.
It's the vision that we have. You know, we haven't achieved big, massive things yet, but we have a strong team, and you know, we're working on it. You know, so it's we definitely there's no shortage of motivation to do it. Let's put it that way. You know.
But on that point, on motivation, like, because I'm doing a little bit of weight loss and trying things there, and you know, you can always be motivated at the right times when you're happy and things are good and the sun. Yeah. But when the motivation drops, What makes you say, "Sod it, I'm going to pack this in"? Because with your background, your experience, you can get a corporate job, getting paid very well, and not having to worry about any of these things, bills, and things like that. What makes you keep on going?
For me, a big part is the military experiences that I went through, and people who didn't make it through. Both on our side and all the people that were unnecessarily killed. And I want to try to create a future where that doesn't have to happen. And so I think that's the sort of the deep emotional driver. So I guess it's and then there's. That's one of them, and then there's I've built a team where they've made certain commitments, and I'm committed to them. So basically, same kind of principles as the military.
Okay, relying on each other.
Yeah, so I think the big one though is trying to create a future where we can avoid unnecessary conflict. Because at the end of the day, all these wars that have happened. Yeah. Most of these I think can be avoided if things were done differently prior to the time, so, yeah.
Okay. Very nice. Yeah. Very nice. We normally like to end on what we call wildcard questions. So within these cans, there is a question.
Okay.
You have to choose one. I can read out to you, you can read out, and then you can choose to answer it if you like. So you choose a can, I'll,
Okay.
I don't know what's in them.
All right.
So you choose a can and I'll read out, and then you can
choose this one, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Let's do that one here. Have you ever had an arch nemesis? And who were they? If you have not had one, how would they have challenged you?
When I was a very young kid, there was a guy that was very strong academically, and we compete with each other. So I wouldn't call it an arch nemesis. I'm trying to warm myself up a bit there. I can't think that I've had an arch nemesis really in my adult life.
Okay.
Can't think that I do. But if I did have one, and how would that person challenge me? I guess I'd say if they're very innovative, they've got better ways of doing things. I would say try not to be childish and adversarial about it. Try to see what they're doing, what you can learn from them, and try to offer to them what they can learn from you, and try to shape the win-win. That's a big part of our philosophy.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I like that.
I think that's where we got to get to in general with humanity. We need to focus more on that. We don't have to have this win-lose. The win-lose formula is very outdated.
Yeah, because there's enough to go around.
There's enough to go around.
Yeah.
At one point in time, we were able to, certain people were able to convince us that there's not enough to go around.
Yeah.
Populations are too big and blah 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 blah. But that's a lot of nonsense. With good management, good leadership, we don't have to have. We have to have this stuff. So
okay, all right. So you're a big water guy. I have to ask the question.
Yeah.
Very important question. Still or sparkling?
Definitely still. Definitely
still. Room temperature or cold?
Room temperature.
Okay, good. Just to check, because they always ask you. The audience have asked us to ask you a question. Do you believe in global warming? And if so, what can be done? What can water do to help?
Yeah, I definitely do believe. I believe in global warming, climate change. Absolutely. Yeah. There's some debates about what causes it. Is it all man-made, or is some of it's natural cycles? I think it's probably both. I personally don't think there's simple answers to these kind of things. I think what can be done to change it? Well, going back to the linear economy, each person, when they go and buy stuff, they don't think about it this way, but it's easy to pick it off the shelf, pay for it, but what does it actually mean if you trace it back? Where's this thing made? Where's the water polluted?
Yeah.
So try to do things in a sustainable kind of a way, just at your level. And I'm not talking about buzzwords, sustainability, and so on. Just do things in a way where, when you think it through, it's not damaging the environment.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
And lastly, what water do you drink? Which brand?
I drink Masafi because it comes from the ground.
Very good. Lew, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been great talking to you, sir. Thank you very much.